Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on Monday, April 5th. LA Galaxy get through their first game in Arizona over the weekend. I'm not sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can take from that, but we're going to try to take some stuff from that. We're going to look at MLS's new concussion sub rule and how possibly it can get you to 9 substitutions. That'll be fun to sort of try to kick around a little bit. We got that, and then, of course, incoming signing alert, Aruga. Kevin Cabral, the 21-year-old Frenchman, looks like he is on his way to Los Angeles. We're going to talk a whole bunch about that. To help me do all of that, it's the panda himself, Mr. Kevin Baxter. Kev, how's it going, buddy?
When you said Aruga, I thought maybe they signed a guy named Aruga.
Or maybe Arugula?
Look at this. Be a goldfish, Josh. Be a goldfish.
I saw somebody has, Kevin, and I'm not sure if it's officially licensed or if somebody just made it, and I don't know that it really matters at this point. But somebody has an AFC Richmond kit that is out there that actually has, and it's like, what player and name do you want? What name and number do you want to put on there? And so I immediately said, it was funny. The Hammer, I said, what number is Roy Kent? And so we had to look it up real quick, and he's a number 6, which makes sense. We knew that in his heart, right? Here's the interesting thing, though. Do you know what number Danny Rojas is on Ted Lasso?
I think he's probably 10.
He's not. He is number 14. Who with the LA Galaxy wears number 14?
Oh, he's Chicharito.
Is he Chicharito? Does that make sense?
The Mexican guy, yeah.
I mean, are they trying to tell us something on Ted Lasso? Were we not digging deep enough on this? I mean, this is totally Hammer's thing. He's not even going to be on this week. Sophie's going to be on Thursday, so I'm stealing his bit right now, so that way we can talk about it. But Kevin, I don't know that I was prepared to find out that Danny Rojas might actually be Chicharito in real life. I feel like it doesn't quite match up, but that's at least on the surface, and I connected those dots.
But Chicharito scored 2 more goals than Danny Rojas last year?
2 more. That's right. 200% more.
Have you ever heard Chicharito say soccer is life?
Football is life.
Football is life.
I bet you we could get him to say it. I don't even think that was hard. I think that should be our goal here for the rest of the preseason, is to get Chicharito to say football is life, so we can do a side-by-side comparison. That's my.
By the way, speaking of Chicharito, I talked to Greg Vanney today, and you were right. When we talked last week, they did charter over to Arizona, and they will presumably charter back. Today was media day, and the reason that's important, or maybe not important, is you and I have gone to media days when a media day in MLS is where everybody, the top 2 or 3 players from every team, some of the coaches, a lot of team officials. In the preseason, generally the 3rd week in January, they all come to a hotel somewhere in Los Angeles. All the networks bring in people, and players go from room to room. They model the new kits. They come meet with us. They meet with a whole round table of media people. But this is where they shoot a lot of those little videos that you see during the game. Like they'll say, oh, we spoke to Carlos Vela about the World Cup. And then there's Carlos Vela talking about the World Cup, or Chicharito, or whomever. They tape all these things ahead of time. All the networks come to these hotels. Well, they didn't have that this year because of COVID. So apparently they had media day at the team hotel today in Tucson. My understanding is a lot of the networks either went to Tucson because there's so many teams there.
Right.
So rather than go to all 20 cities or whatever it is, 26 cities, they went to Tucson. They got a number of teams at one place, or either that or they did it all on Zoom. But Chicharito had his media day today. Jonathan Dos Santos had a media day. Greg Vanney also went to a special ballroom at the hotel and had his media day. And I got a chance to talk to him. We'll get a lot of that interview later in the pod. But so the Galaxy getting ready for the season opener, that game is going to be on ESPN. So I assume many of the media day interviews today were with ESPN people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of how it goes. I always where was where was my invite? I always feel like MLS forgets that I exist, and that's okay because I'm used to it. Most of the time, I just make you tell them that I exist, and then I just hang on to your coattails through all that stuff. But
we for years the print media or anyone that wasn't a network, a rights holder is what they call them. If you're a rights holder, if you're somebody that pays for the broadcast rights, you get all kinds of special privileges, and we were never invited to this stuff. But then they decided, you know what, we have all these players, we have all these coaches, we have all these people here, and why not invite the print media? They can come in for a day or two, and they can meet two players from every team, and just get a bunch of stuff they use throughout the year. It's really, really helpful, and that was a new thing that MLS did. Of course, we didn't see it this year because of COVID, and there's a lot of fear. You and I have talked about this in the journalism business. There's a lot of fear that we may never go back to the way it was before. The teams in every sport are finding out it's much easier. They have much more control when they do all this stuff by Zoom. They don't have if we ask a question that they think is a little bit rude, you hear that, oh, we didn't quite hear you. You must have muted yourself. We didn't get that question. Things that they can't do when it's face to face. So we'll see if it goes back to the old way. But right now, everything by Zoom. And so I didn't get invited. You didn't get invited. If you're not a rights holder, you didn't get invited.
Yeah, I was gonna the really interesting thing that I sort of found out with all it's the relationship building that we normally get to. Normally, you can joke around with guys whenever you do it. I refuse to use any of my questions that I have, during our Zoom calls or anything else to like sort of do the relationship building questions, which are sort of the offhanded ones, the funny ones, that type of thing. It's like usually you get two questions, you move on. I will say, and I hope that nobody's listening, I have found my ability to attend post-training, Zoom calls a lot easier than actually having to go out and do training, being I have my regular job during the day. It's hard for me to get out for training or do anything, and normally I would save that for the weekends if I was going to go out on a weekend. Like if there was a game on a Sunday, I could go out on Saturday and sort of get the day before stuff with those guys. But there's some positives certainly to it. I think the access has been, at least in my opinion, being where I'm at, a little more open in some of these things. But at the same time, you're missing that relationship. You're missing that ability to sort of look at these guys and be like, oh yeah, well, you know me very well because we see each other at your locker, every single time, and we have a good rapport and we can make jokes and that type of thing. So I think it'll be extremely fascinating to find out what is going to happen whenever we sort of get post-COVID. Although, if you looked at the Texas Rangers and their stadium today, they're already post-COVID. So they're
a lot of those fans won't be back for the next homestand. They're going to be in the hospital.
It's interesting. We're right on the cusp there, right on the cusp. So,
what you say about access in my experience in other sports as well, not just soccer, is they may not know a player, may not know who Josh Guesman is. They may not know who Kevin Baxter is. They may not care. Damian Calhoun, all these guys. They may not know our names, but they may know our outlets where we work for. But they know, hey, here comes the fat guy. I like that guy. He's good. I'll talk to him.
Right.
And when you say next question comes from Josh Guesman of Corner of the Galaxy, there's the deer in the headlights. They don't know who that is. But
right.
if they see your face, they go, oh yeah, I know that guy. I trust him.
That's why
you're right.
That's why I'm always on Zoom with my camera on, and I'm always like smiling. So I'm trying not to look, intimidating as I am. I always ask the hardest questions. That's really, really my thing. No. Again, I think all this is really interesting. I mean, Listen, there was no post media. There's no Wi-Fi at the stadiums in Tucson, which I think is humorous, but it doesn't surprise me because they're not necessarily supposed to be these giant professional soccer stadiums. They're, very lower level soccer area over at FC Tucson and in that Tucson area. There's a whole bunch of fields. They have a nice stadium there, but it's still very small. So there's not all these media facilities you would expect, but there was no post game interview with Greg Vanney or getting to talk to any players after the LA Galaxy played to a 1-0 loss to Sporting Kansas City on Saturday. So, it's interesting. I'm so used to being able to talk to them even whenever they're away, right? Because most of the time we wouldn't get to talk to anybody if they're away, Kevin, right? Because unless you go to the game, you don't get to sit there and talk to Greg Vanney after, they play Miami in Miami. But whenever they play Miami in Miami, you and I were going to get a chance because we're able to get on a Zoom call and talk to them and get quotes and get answers. And in a lot of ways, it has connected us a little bit more to the team, even whenever they're traveling. I don't know if that part can be preserved. Sort of like whenever you see the auctions, Kevin, where there's people who are bidding in live in person, and they're sitting there raising their little paddles. And then there's the people who they have the online bidders and who are over there, and there's people at computers handling the online bidders and that type of thing. So I wonder sometimes, if there's a good combo there, because I want to be there in person, but I'm not going to be able to go to every away game. Everybody knows that.
Well, I mean, you make a really good point. In the past, the way that we would have done at the LA Times is if the Galaxy are home, we go to that game physically, go to that game, we have access, we do interviews, we watch the game. When the team is on the road, there's no way to talk to players. It would be a hassle for the PR staff to try to get me on the phone with every player or Damien from the Daily News, whoever it would be. So we just use the Associated Press account of those games. And generally, with MLS, sometimes those are 3 or 4 or 5 graphs on deadline. It's very short. Well, now we watch the game on TV. We're going to have the Zoom access. So we're going to with a staff writer, I think we're going to cover all 34 games, home and away, because we have the ability to do that now.
Again, it's this fine line of saying you have more coverage. I think if you want to combine the best of both worlds, that there is the ability to get more coverage and more access that perhaps we weren't prepared to do pre-COVID. So anyway, very interesting. All sort of fun stuff to talk about. Let's get to the LA Galaxy and looking at this scrimmage a little bit. I'm not going to say, Kevin, that we learned anything from any of this stuff that we have seen recently. In fact, as somebody who is trying to always break down what we see and use that to something that we're going to see in the actual season, it's almost impossible for me right now to sit there and say, Kevin, we absolutely have seen something from any of these guys, because I don't think we have seen really what the LA Galaxy are going to look like. I think we've seen a limited number of individual performances that are actually going to carry over to a starting lineup whenever that happens. And so I feel like there's some frustration, certainly from me covering the games and watching the games. I watched Saturday. I was here. I sat down in front of the computer. I got on LAGalaxy.com. I watched the game, and there's not a lot for me to take away from that. Of course, I have things I can take away from it, but I'm trying to say, what are we seeing right now that has the LA Galaxy doing anything but finishing last in the Western Conference? Because if they had to start the guys who are out there in these games right now, and I'm of the opinion that Vanney has not gotten to start very many of his starters, but they're going to have to put 11 guys on the field against Miami whenever that happens, Kevin. Sort of what have we learned from that so far? And my answer is that there's some guys who can possibly be subs that are possibly going to get some minutes. But other than that, really trying to take some solid things away. What's like a solid thing we can take away so far is that Jonathan Bond is the number 1 goalkeeper. I don't think there's an argument there now. I don't think anybody can make a reasonable argument against that. It's Jonathan Bond. So, I mean, that's one thing we've learned. But is there another solid thing that we've learned from any of these preseason games?
No, and Greg Vanney talked about that when we spoke today. He said he was not real happy with the finishing in front of the net. He said they thought they did really poorly. The execution offensively at the front. He is very happy with Jonathan Bond. He called him a great player, and he thinks he's going to do some really exciting things this year. But again, if we want to put the lineup back up there, if you look at the lineup, so you have Jonathan Bond. He's going to be a starter. I think Steris and Araujo, they'll be starters.
Yep.
Villafania,
starter.
But a starter, and then Chicharito.
Yes.
So you're missing Sebastian Lletget. I know these guys are international duty. I know where they are, but I'm just saying when you look at the lineup there, you're missing Sebastian Lletget. You're missing Jonah. You're missing. We got to figure that Grandsir or Victor Vasquez going to be in there. There's we don't know what's going on with Christian Pavone yet. This is very much a work in progress. And again, we're going to reference this Vanney interview a lot today. I spoke to him at some length about a number of different things, and he was open about that. He said, we've got to get these guys into camp, first of all. We've got to get them fit. Then we've got to get them accustomed to our style of play. He thinks that's going to happen much quicker with Victor Vasquez than with the others because he's used to that style of play. But here's a guy that's played 14 minutes in the last year. He's got to get fit. I'm not sure, and we've talked about this before, I'm not sure we're going to see Greg Vanney's top 11 until maybe, I don't know, mid-May, or at least early May, because these guys aren't even in the country yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are more guys in the country, so I think we're close. Victor Vasquez is, and we're going to talk about them. So Victor Vasquez is with the team now. He was shown training, and it seems that he's already gone through quarantine. He was shown in a pool today with Jonathan Dos Santos, with Sebastian Lletget, with the entire rest of the team. It looked like they were in a pool doing some sort of workout and regen, I would imagine, in the pool. It was a rooftop pool, by the way, and they had a DJ too.
Was that Victor? I thought that was Pete Vagenas.
He looks. Kevin and I were talking before we recorded. And I said, "Why does Pete Vagenas look like so many soccer players?" Because that's not the first time we've ever said that looks like Pete Vagenas to a guy who is not Pete Vagenas.
Well, let me ask you: have you ever seen Victor Vasquez and Pete Vagenas in the same room? I have not. I have not.
Absolutely not. So, I mean, you are getting some guys. Basically, I think Wednesday you're probably going to see Victor Vasquez. I think that might be one of the guys who sort of shows himself as a player who will actually get some minutes on Wednesday. I think Saturday is going to be the best chance because we've heard that Grand Sur might be in the country now as well, and so he's quarantining, doing that thing that he needs to do until he's ready to join the team in Arizona as well. So it's funny. We look at the starting lineup again, and I could say there are 5 starters on here that I would consider starters, but if we're considering the Miami game and how quickly that's coming here, Kevin, I have to start putting in more people than just that. So I'm going to tell you that Bond is a starter. I'm going to tell you that Greg Vanney keeps starting Jalen Neal next to Dan Steres. That's clearly a placeholder at some point, but he's not starting Nick DePuy in there in this quote-unquote starting lineup. This is the lineup that had all the starters in it, Kevin. So
Williams is not back yet either.
Yeah, and Derek Williams isn't. Although I did see Derek Williams in the pool as well. So we've heard that he should be back to training and that eventually he will be. So Williams, Pipo Gonzalez is I haven't seen. I don't know if he went to Arizona. I think he did. Somebody said they did see him on the plane, but we don't know really the extent of his quote unquote bone bruise that he has, and whether or not that's more serious than maybe we first thought. So you have that. But if I go back to the starting lineup, let's talk about guys who might start in Miami. Jalen Neal might start in Miami because Greg Vanney keeps putting him in the starting position whenever it goes. Dan Steres is going to start. Julian Araujo is going to start out on the right-hand side. Jorge Villafana is going to start at the left side. So, I mean, as Vanney has been rolling this out, Neal has been the starter. Neal might start against Miami, so you need to look at that. The interesting one is Zubac, and whether or not Ethan Zubac kind of goes into this. He's been playing the right wing because he's needed to play the right wing, Kevin, because they haven't had a whole bunch of guys that can play there right now. But with Grand Sur in, and then also with Kevin Cabral, looks like they're going to close that signing as well. We'll talk about that more. His time there is short, but it's probably not too short that maybe he doesn't play there against Miami, and people just fell over holding their chest with Ethan Zubac. But Zubac might be there. Kleshton is a starter right now because of the position that the LA Galaxy are in. Maybe Victor Vasquez gets up to speed in time to get some minutes, but does he start in Miami? It's probably Kleshton. You have Carlos Harvey. You have Aguirre, who is an LA Galaxy 2 trialist, Kevin, who has looked to be one of the better LA Galaxy players in the starting lineup. Right. And so I look at that and say, okay, what are they going to do? Because that's a spot that they keep putting him in. That's a Victor Vasquez spot. That's a Sebastian Lletget spot. So you'd imagine that Sebastian Lletget comes in and plays for Aguirre. But Aguirre has looked so good in the MLS side that I think it's almost impossible that Galaxy 2 doesn't sign him. So that's just an interesting sort of sidebar there. Dunbar is holding a spot right now, but is he holding a spot long enough for Grand Sur or for Cabral to come in to start in Miami? That's unknown. And then Chicharito is a starter. There are a lot more starters on this list, Kevin, than you would imagine that there are whenever you first look at it and say, no, these guys aren't starters. Vanney is telling you something there.
Well, and there's a bigger thing there, too, is that we're trying to find 11. We know Bond, so we're trying to find 10. It is going to be a bear of a day in Miami. It's going to be humid. It's going to be hot. It's going to be sticky. These are guys that, as we're saying, can enough players get 45 minutes fit, much less 90 minutes fit. You're going to need to have, 15 guys that can play. I think that the bench gets emptied. I think, Vanney goes with everybody because guys aren't going to be fit. It's going to be a humid, hot day. Grant Sierra, I don't know. He hasn't played much in the last couple of years. Even if he gets into training now, I don't know if he gets fit to play deep into a game in that humidity. The guy that, Kevin Cabral, he had a lifetime high with 28 starts this year. He's a guy that could play. He may, who knows if he'll even be out of quarantine.
Right.
He should be here soon, but will he be out of quarantine? Will he be able to play? I mean, it is a tough situation. And we're talking about just getting guys fit, and then you've got to learn Greg Vanney's style of play, which is not easy. It's not super complicated like Greg Berhalter, but it's not easy. You and I were talking earlier this afternoon. Your idea, you think they're going to go with a 4-2-3-1 is the way that you draw it up.
That's how they've been lining up in most of these. I mean, you haven't seen a lot. I really think Sebastian Lletget is going to be more on the top line with Chicharito, so there's going to be the chance. But if you look at what the Galaxy have tried to do, it's tried to get runners from the midfield, whether it's Sasha Kljestan, whether it's Sebastian Lletget, any of those guys in the midfield or even from the wing, they've tried to get them into the box with Chicharito to give them two guys up top a lot. So, in my mind, that's how they've been doing. And if you go to this game, listen, the Galaxy lost 1-0. Busio from Sporting Kansas City hit a great shot. There was no chance for Bond to get there. And he only had the tiniest little spot to sort of take that shot. I have no issues with that. It was a good shot, and it is what you would like the defense to step and take away that little bit of space he did have. Work in progress, fine. Move on from that. Sporting Kansas City controlled more of the game, I think, than Greg Vanney would love, but I also know, and we've certainly heard, and you've said it as well, and he said it in his post-game because we got some video of it, that he wasn't happy with the finishing. Chicharito hit one off the bar. Sasha Kljestan missed a wide-open shot. There were 2 or 3 really good chances for the LA Galaxy to score goals, and if they hit on two of those 3, they win the game 2-1. So I like that progress. For me, Chicharito made good runs but lacked the execution. Kljestan had a chance at a couple of goals. Jalen Neal continues to start next to Steres. That was one of my big takeaways, is that Jalen Neal looks like he's going to get some minutes early in the season, and then that probably fades whenever Derek Williams comes back. We imagine Derek Williams as the starter next to Steres. But Neal is showing that maybe he's head and shoulders above Nick DePuy, who was really sort of listed as probably the number 2 behind Steres when you look at it. For me, Julian Araujo was... looked like a guy who just came back from international duty and didn't quite have his legs underneath him. So that doesn't surprise anybody. Cameron Dunbar was more quiet in this game. I mean, what do you want to take away from a game that then at halftime they basically go and switch most of the players? I think Neal went 90 minutes. He might have been one of the few LA Galaxy players who went 90 minutes. They even took Bond off at half, and Jonathan Klinsmann came in. So again, I mean, I don't know what everybody wants from this. But I'll tell you what you got, and what you got was that the LA Galaxy have not rolled out a starter-heavy lineup this entire time. Now, does that change on Wednesday? I think it changes maybe a little bit, but we all know that the ultimate sort of test here is going to be on Saturday, and sort of getting into that game rhythm is that Saturday game. So on Wednesday, do we see, another sort of half lineup of guys who are just going to get 45 minutes and then go out and play 90 minutes on Saturday? Because that Saturday game is the one that really should show us, what's going to happen with this Galaxy team.
Well, Greg Vanney had another interesting thing today. He talked about, and as I'm looking at this footage, I'm starting to get what he meant a little bit. He said, that what's going on now, it's fine. It's a good way to evaluate. But he said when they start playing games in front of fans, he's talking about opening day in Miami and then back at Dignity Health Sports Park, even with limited fans, he said there's going to be extra pressure on these guys. So, they're going to be playing for a crowd now, which I think he was referencing last year when, the teams didn't play in front of crowds, but also these exhibition games where there's no fans there, that it feels a little bit like a scrimmage or a practice session. And he thinks that there's going to be a big transition to make when the games start actually being played in big stadiums with fans there. And you wonder, too, what does Greg Vanney do as a coach? He has a set style of play that he's been successful with. It's a little bit challenging, as we mentioned. He's talked about trying to get guys up to speed, get the chemistry, get them familiar with what he wants to accomplish. Do you dumb that down a little bit, saying, look, we just don't have enough time. There are too many games coming too fast for us to really, hone in on this style of play? Do we relax and back off a little bit? Or does he stay firm and say, no, this is our style of play, and if you guys don't figure it out until June, so be it? I mean, they can't give away that many games at the start of the season.
No, but at the same time, you can keep the idea simple, and he talked about that, after the second New England game, which was, having to maybe he gave guys too much to think about. Maybe he tried to do too much too soon. So Greg Vanney is clearly adjusting what he's giving these guys, but there's basic principles to his style of play. He knows that. And so he's going to make sure and drill those basic principles. He's going to say, this is how we move. This is how it goes. He did this with Toronto, and everybody watched him do it with Toronto, which is, the guys in year one of this understood his system of play. They couldn't execute it as good as they want. As they went on and sort of kept filling in pieces and kept getting better, and as year 4 comes around, year 2 it got better, year 3 it gets better, year 4, as you have that consistent style of play, as you plug pieces in, as guys really stop thinking about this and start reacting with their instincts, that's when you get good at this. And so Greg is already telling us that he's managing sort of the mental workload that is happening with these guys. And you can melt professional players down, Kevin, by giving people too much to think about. It happens in the real world too. So I don't know why anybody would be surprised about this. It's just, you have to be careful what you do when you do it. And whether or not you're taking too big of a bite to swallow. You need to be able to digest each and every piece of what Greg Vanney is trying to do. And his whole thing this preseason has been, it doesn't matter who's in that position. This is the way they need to play. This is the way we need to play in our system. So it doesn't matter that, some of these guys aren't here. Whenever they are here, you need to expect them to play this way because this is the system and this is how we move within that system.
Well, to that point, I asked him when he came in, I said, Guillermo and Dennis, when they came in together, if you remember, Dennis and Guillermo both came in together, the team was terrible. And, the question was, how long, what's the process here? And Dennis and Guillermo both told us that there was a 3-year timeline, that, they wanted to compete for the playoffs from year 1, but they didn't think that they would be an MLS Cup contender until year 3. And I asked Greg about that, and he laughed and said, look, I don't think the Galaxy is an organization where we need to tear it down to the studs and start over again. He said there are a lot of good pieces here, so it's not starting over. And he laughed at the idea of a timeline and said, isn't it always 3 years? Doesn't everybody always say 3 years? And that's true. I thought about that. Every sport, you always hear 3-year timeline. He said, I don't believe in timelines. And then he gave that exact example that you did, and I'm reading it here. He said, when he came into Toronto, he said the first full season, they made the playoffs, but they dropped out early because they just weren't prepared for that. He said the second season, we made it all the way to the final, and that was that game against Seattle. The opposition didn't even get a shot on goal, and Toronto lost in penalty kicks.
Right.
The third year is when they won it all. And so, he's saying, yeah, look, in this case, it was a 3-year plan, but that's just because that's how it came together. There wasn't an idea of we're going to go from here to here and we're going to make it. You develop and you get better every year. And he did talk about, as you said, the style of play. We're not going to cheat on that. Guys have just got to, suck it up and learn it. And that's not going to change. They're going to change because they're going to learn that style of play.
Yeah, it makes sense. You see it. I want to say that the LA Galaxy had some good spells of working the ball. I didn't love the sort of dumping the ball over the top a whole bunch, but I can understand that. Zubac at the wing is just so interesting from a sense that I don't think Ethan Zubac is necessarily a gifted player at that position. I think really he's probably more of a target forward, and that probably suits him better and a whole bunch of things. He hasn't looked horrible at that wing, and I think people expected him to be horrible. But it's also a new position, so you see times where he doesn't get it right, where he's not in the right position, and where things sort of don't continue for him, and things don't play out. But the LA Galaxy haven't looked bad at no point. I mean, Sporting Kansas City played a very starter-heavy rotation in there, and the LA Galaxy lost 1-0 when really they probably could have scored 2 or 3 goals. And Sporting Kansas City probably could have scored a couple goals as well. So, I mean, they were fairly evenly matched. I don't think fans, and I see people reacting, sort of poorly, which is, I can't take any more Galaxy losses like this. This is just ridiculous, whole deal. they played okay. This is a preseason game. It's still a preseason game. It's not a regular season game, and you could tell the intensity's not there as it's a regular season game. That doesn't happen until, guess what, the regular season. That's when that actually happens in these. But you've seen good sort of progress, baby steps. From this last game, it feels like there's no progress made from the previous game, right? We're still seeing subs upon subs and guys coming in, and just, the individual assessments are fine, but what about the team? And you can't analyze the team, Kevin, without seeing the team, and you're not seeing the team right now.
Well, and it's a work in progress. I think that's going to be the key all year long. It's going to be a work in progress. A lot of these second string guys, when we decide who the first string and second string is, they're going to get a lot of minutes during the summer. June, July, it's going to be heavy with international duty for a lot of guys. But when you break down the team, let's just, going from the front back, Chicharito is going to have a better year. Why? Because he can't have a worse year. So I expect a little bit of improvement there. Is it going to be enough to make a difference? I don't know, but it can't be any worse. The midfield with the wingers and central midfielder would be Sebastian Lletget. I think Sebastian's going to have a great year. I think the national team's really helped him. I don't know. If Pavone doesn't come back, I don't know that someone is going to have that level of production. That doesn't mean we won't have there won't be productive wings on both sides. I just don't know that it's going to be Sebastian or Christian Pavone level. I think the midfield is still question mark. It depends. I think the midfield may wind up with some of the same pieces. I just think Greg Vanney is going to use them in a better way. I like the idea of you talking about Sebastian Lletget pushing into the box. I think that creates room behind him for Jonathan Dos Santos, who Greg said is going to be, Vanney said is going to be a box-to-box midfielder. That's what you would want to do if Sebastian pushes forward, Jonathan comes up behind him. The back line, I don't know if I think it has more depth. We'll have to see how many minutes Villafaña can play. Acosta behind him looks healthy. That's going to be helpful. So I think the back line, the depth is going to make a difference. I don't know if the starter is necessarily going to be any better or any worse, but I think the one thing that we can agree about this soon into the preseason is big upgrade at goalkeeper.
It seems to be
huge different there.
Yeah, it seems to be. I was talking to somebody within the organization talking about Jonathan Bond, and this person goes big upgrade. And I was like, yeah. I would say this person also thought that Villafaña is a solid player at left back as well. Listen, if Villafaña is as good as Emiliano Insua, then the LA Galaxy did a good job in terms of how they did it. There's a chance, I think, that Villafaña could be better than Insua, at least more impactful on the offensive side. But defensive side, I think Villafaña has it. So I think that could end up being an upgrade as well. So, I mean, we talk about those sort of being upgrades. Chicharito is still Chicharito. Now, this season, and I heard you say, this season should be an upgrade, right? Chicharito 2.0.
It can't be any worse. It's simply, it can't be worse.
It absolutely can. It can. I just think it would be very difficult. I agree with you. There's room. But I mean, if he doubles production, that's only 4 goals, Kevin, and that's not really good enough for what they're paying him. But anything between 10 and 20 goals with some assists in there as well, that starts to be a productive spot for the LA Galaxy. And they need somebody to score because Christian Pavone, the leading goal scorer, isn't going to be here for the Miami game, certainly, and I don't know that he's ever going to be back with the LA Galaxy. So all of those things are interesting. We talk so much about a defensive midfielder that perhaps Greg Vanney wanted to get, and he had sort of hinted at least at one point that perhaps that was something that they were looking at. But when you look at it right now, Jonathan Dos Santos is the defensive midfielder because they're going to either put Victor Vasquez or Sasha Kljestan into the box-to-box role, and Sebastian Lletget is going to be more that cam position, right? So for right now, at least, you're not going to have Victor Vasquez or Sasha Kljestan running around being the defensive midfielder on that. It's going to be Jonathan Dos Santos. He's the one who's going to be able to have the most energy on that, and he'll still be able to, and I think Greg is going to try to get him forward in certain positions. But you're going to see that Sebastian Lletget drives the offensive side of things from that center position, assuming the LA Galaxy get their wingers in and can place them. Otherwise, perhaps in Miami, Sebastian Lletget is the starter on the wing somewhere, as we have talked, because they do have some possibilities for some players there in the center that they can sort of switch around and move around and those things. So,
one more thing about Chicharito. I don't think he's going to get the long leash he had last year. And I think the season, that was a product of the season. Remember, he played 2 games, he got hurt, or 3 games, and then he got hurt at MLS's back. Then it took him a while to get back. By then, it's late September. He's a substitute. You really can't, I think that it was fair to say you really can't judge how he's doing. He's only playing a few minutes a game. Then when he was a starter again, we're already in mid-October. I think Guillermo wanted to give him a run of games to see how he would do. And then finally he pulled the plug and Chicharito got benched. And that was very close to the end of the season. It just, there wasn't enough games to let that sort itself out. I think if Chicharito is playing, every game and starting every game, and we're 4 or 5 games into the season, 6 games in, and he's not productive, I think Greg Vanney makes a switch. I don't think he decides, we're going to let this guy have 15 or 16 games to figure this out.
Right.
If he looks at it and says, this looks a lot like the guy that never got it on track last year, I don't know who he puts in there. I don't know how he moves things around. I just don't think that Chicharito is going to get the whole season to figure it out this year.
I mean, what are you going to do though? You going to bench him? I mean, does that make any sense? He's the highest paid player in Major League Soccer. Are you going to say, hey, dude, sorry, you haven't been playing that well, and we have almost nobody to back you up right now because we haven't signed Augie Williams, and we're just going to start Ethan Zubak there? I mean, you kind of just got to let that dude spin up. The rotor's got to spin, Kevin. Even if he doesn't get off the ground, he's got to at least attempt to fly every once in a while.
They put Jesse's artist at right back. Maybe Araujo goes forward and Chicharito plays right back for a while. What do you think?
Flips it on his head. I don't hate the idea, by the way. I don't hate the idea at all. All right, that's sort of what we see. We're going to talk about Kevin Cabral, that rumor, here in a second. I wanted to get to MLS making an announcement though first. MLS came out with their concussion sub rule, and this is part of I think IFAB, which is the International Football Association, or like Association Board or something like that comes up with the rules. They sort of allowed for this experiment to take place, and Major League Soccer, I think USL and NWSL certainly are all going to be part of this season, and we'll see if other leagues around the world also sign on to it. We've heard, Kevin, the big problem here is, let's state the problem. The problem is that guys have been getting concussions. They've been hit in the head. They're on the field. A team doctor comes out, and the team doctor looks at him and goes, "Are you okay?" And the player's like, "Yeah," even though the player can't stand up straight because he just was concussed because his head hit the ground or he hit heads with somebody else. And the team is all out of subs, and it's with only 10 minutes to go, and they're trying to play. So they don't want the player to come off the field even if he's concussed and possibly put him in a life endangering his life. So that's the problem. Is we've seen that too many times. And how many times do we see it in any league around the world where you see a guy who smashes his head on something, somebody, some other thing, the ground, the post, however it goes, and he's over on the sideline for a minute, and then he's like, yeah, I'm going to come back in, and he starts walking in there, and everybody's like, that dude should not be on the field. Teams have been reluctant to pull them off, and certainly in recent times that's been a little more higher profile, so there has been a little bit more of understanding, but there's still a lot of misses in this. So MLS comes out with the US Soccer comes out with the concussion sub rule.
And you like this rule.
I do. I mean, listen, there are, and we're going to talk about it, there are ways that it's going to go sideways. But I think anytime you're trying to protect a player from a head injury that could endanger their life, or, and especially endanger their long-term health, it's a good thing. So I have no problem with that. Here's what's going to happen in 2021. U.S. Soccer and MLS has announced basically that the normal sub rule will be 5 subs again. I think, and this is just me, guessing, Kevin, I don't think we're ever going back to 3 subs in world football. I think it's going to be 5 subs from here on out. I think it's going to be adopted as a rule, and everybody's just going to go with it because we kind of like seeing more players, and we like the pace of play that it allows whenever you can change 5 guys. And it doesn't mean that you have to have 5 guys, you don't have to use all 5 of your subs, and you only get 3 chances to do it, but they don't count like at the midfield. At halftime is one of the chances. So there's really 4 opportunities to make 5 subs. So you can do that. So I think 5 subs. So the 5 subs is going to be normal. Then there's going to be what they call concussion subs, and each team will be allowed to get 2 concussion subs. And basically what happens is if somebody is suspected, Kevin, of possibly getting a head injury, they're able to do an on the field or an off the field assessment, which is super interesting because we just sort of learned about this as well. But there are doctors who are able to watch what is happening on video and provide the doctor on the sideline with video angles and just sort of feed and maybe perhaps even advice that this player possibly could have a concussion. And so they're trying to remove this from being a team decision. They're trying to make this...
And a referee decision. The officials will not make this decision either.
Yeah, they're not allowed to make the decision. They'll stop the play if there's a suspected head injury, as they're trained to do.
As they do now,
Yeah, but it's not up to them. They have no say in whether or not it happens or not. It's supposed to be up to the medical advice. And let's say somebody is suspected of having a concussion, they're going to pull them off the field. Then the team who has had that player, if they've already used all 5 of their subs, then they get a concussion sub. All right, so they're able to go ahead and use a concussion sub and to pull that in. The concussion sub, then you get 2 of them. All right, and then what happens, Kevin, is on the other side of the bench there, on the other side of the half line, the other team is allowed an additional sub. If they've used all 5 of their subs, then they're able to use a 6th if the other team has used a concussion sub. All right, and each team is allowed 2 concussion subs. So that means that the other team could use possibly as many as 7 subs in a game. Okay, so that's sort of where we sit on this. I hope that makes sense. If you use a concussion sub, the other team, if they've already used their 5s, gets an additional sub, right? So they get up to 7.
But do the math. So we're at 20 players now because of the 5 substitute.
I think we're at 20 or 22. I can't remember what it was.
If it was 18, if you got 7 subs, one of those subs is a goalkeeper at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're running out of guys on the bench if you make 7. Do you want to hear the really wacky part of this? Let's go extreme. The you said whenever I told you this is never going to happen. I feel like it's absolutely going to happen at least once.
Well, I can't remember a game where there's been, two people on the same team with a concussion.
Right.
And so yes, it's possible.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's likely, but it wouldn't be out of the blue that if it did happen, especially now that, who knows? I bet you there are players that played with concussions that they couldn't come out. They didn't want to come out. They didn't want to hurt their team.
Absolutely.
It's just not the coaching staff. Sometimes it's the player saying, I'm not right, but there's 5 minutes left and I can't let my team down. So there is that. I think the other part of it that is bad, and I hope we never have to talk about this, is the team that needs to make a sub because a player maybe twists an ankle or he's just not fit or whatever. And you're going to hear the coaches yelling, like, Pete, you got a concussion, come on out. Just a guy that's fit, coming out because he, quote unquote, has a concussion. I really hope it doesn't get abused like that by coaches that really want to win at any cost. And because then all of a sudden the rules going to have to be looked at again. They're going to have to put all kinds of protocols in. It should be to protect the players. And if you think that this is, I personally did not know of a player dying from a concussion on the field. We know that players have had their life shortened by concussions. That's been documented in England. That players who have repeatedly had concussions, they've had their life shortened, and their post-playing career has not been as fruitful as it could have been. We know right here in this country, Taylor Twellman, he didn't have his life shortened by it, but his career was definitely shortened. He got a concussion playing against the Galaxy. I don't know if Kevin Hartman was the goalie, but he was coming in for a header, and the goalie came out and punched the ball and punched Taylor Twellman in the face. And that was when he was MLS scoring leader.
Right.
He was bothered by concussions the rest of his life. He tells stories about that in that very same game. He didn't know he had a concussion. He took a shot on goal, missed the goal, widely missed the goal, wasn't even close. And he went into his goal celebration, and his teammates had to surround him and tell you, look, you missed the net by 30 feet. He didn't know. He thought the ball had gone in because of where he was mentally with the concussion. So it's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, and it needs to be taken seriously. I mean, the situation that we were alluding to is that technically speaking, with this rule, you can get 9 subs per team. Now, a lot of things would have to go really wacky and sideways. Basically, each team would have to use 2 of their concussion subs, okay? And then, if you use both of your concussion subs for concussions, that allows the other team to get an additional sub as well. And so if you do that twice, that takes it from 7 total subs, the 5 plus the 2 concussion subs, to 9, which would be the 5 subs, the 2 concussion subs, and 2 additional subs.
That's a lot of stoppage time.
It would be, you'd have to have 4 players, 2 from each team collide with each other, and they all fall down and they're all suspected of, listen, there's a whole bunch of things. I don't think it's ever going to come that way. First of all, the concussion subs probably don't hit as hard now, and you're not going to see as big of a deal with it whenever there's 5 subs. 5 subs really does allow a team so many subs to be able to do something to begin with. So the concussion subs shouldn't impact that all that much. Most of the time, I'm going to say that a concussion is covered by those 5. But the fact that you're not penalized or perceived to be penalized by a concussion, by a probable concussion, that you want to err on the side of caution with, that you want to bring somebody out, this just allows that to happen. I think that yes, you might have to worry about somebody abusing the rule. Yes, that might be something you have to look down, but those are all things that I think are something MLS, something that U.S. soccer, and I think that FIFA eventually is just going to be like, you know what, it is what it is. We'll deal with the consequences of that later. We have to be able to protect these guys from head injuries. If you have an epidemic of these concussions and from people's lives being, their careers being cut short, and sort of the stigma that the NFL has right now, which is that they didn't protect their players, we know that there is a lot of money in those lawsuits. Don't be fooled. Yes, they want to do right by the players. Yes, they're certainly going to build that up, Kevin, but at the same time, they also don't want to get sued for $1 billion whenever the players all band together and say, you didn't do enough to protect us for this. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I have zero issues with that. I like the rule.
Well, and credit players like Taylor Twellman, who has done so much to bring public notice and concern to this issue, which it wasn't all that long ago, probably in Taylor's time, when it was like, rub a little dirt on it, you're not hurt, play through the injury. And now we know how dangerous it is. By the way, have you ever can you remember watching a player try to play through a concussion? I've seen it twice. They were both in World Cup games. One was the Argentina-Germany final in Rio, where a German player got a concussion midway through the first half. And he was at one point basically walking circles in the middle of the field, not paying any attention to what was going on around him. He was in a World Cup final, and he thought he was at the beach. Yep. And there was another World Cup game also in Brazil. I think it was Uruguay was playing, and a player was obviously concussed, came out, and they sent him back on the field, and he had no idea where he was. It's really nauseating to watch. It's so obvious the player is in distress, and yet they've left him on the field in a World Cup game. It's really difficult to watch.
Well, again, that rule will be in force for the 2021 season. So one, it confirms 5 subs, because people were asking that. 5 subs this year, 5 normal subs, the 2 concussion subs, and then look for those 2 additional subs as well that happen as a result of the other team using a concussion sub or 2 concussion subs. So keep that in mind and look at that. That's why you're going to see all those subs, the possibility of those subs. So don't be caught off guard whenever that happens. Let's go to...
should we explain just briefly the 5 subs? Why are we at 5 subs now when it used to be 3?
It's another IFAB/FIFA rule that they brought about
because of COVID. Yeah,
because of COVID, because of the condensed schedules that players were playing, the weekend, midweek, weekend, sort of back to back, and the continuous and no breaks. And listen, world football has been getting this way anyway, Kevin, where the amount of people that you need to have on a team for any of these large clubs in Europe, you need to have a lot of people on the team, because you have to play so many lineups, because there are so many competitions that you have to play, cup competitions, regional competitions, championship all that stuff is stuff that you have to pay attention to, and it's been putting wear and tear on players' legs. The 5 subs is sort of an answer to that, and they put it in place during COVID. And like I said, I don't think it's ever going away, because people understand that playing condensed schedules, even without the midweeks all the time, and the LA Galaxy will play 15 games on short rest this year, half their schedule is on short rest. You need those legs, you need those subs. So the 5 subs for me never goes away.
Well, you know why it stays? It's because there is no one against it. The players and the players union love it. Why? Because it creates more jobs, expanded roster. Fans love it because it makes the game better. The game is faster. The place guys aren't exhausted and just kind of going through the motions. It makes the game better. About the only people who might not like it might be the guys writing the checks for the salaries and the payrolls. But if any major team tried to say, "Oh my God, it's too expensive,"
Yeah.
fans aren't going to have that. The owners can't complain about the payrolls now. And besides, if you don't want to own Chelsea, you can sell it to somebody else. That someone's going to pay you a big coin to take it over. So there is nobody against it. So that's why I think you're absolutely right. It's not going to go away. Remember, there was a time when there were no subs at all.
Yeah, that was before really my time whenever I started watching, and I don't like that. I mean, that to me, again, we see it. They're even instituting whenever you go into like extra time, Kevin, that you're allowed an extra sub, because extra time got so boring because everybody was exhausted. They played 90 minutes, and so you want to see something. You want to be able to bring in a game changer, somebody who could do something and change that extra time.
You know
period.
what? I'm going to argue with you there. Yeah. When you get to extra time, when you bring in a sub, I think it changes the game.
Yes.
I like the idea of these guys that have been out there. Now they're gutting it out. Like you watch a Stanley Cup playoff game, those things go 3 and 4 and 5 overtimes. And you just see guys laying it on the line and just giving every ounce of energy. I kind of like that because it does show which team really wants it more. I would hate to see a whole bunch of guys coming in out of the locker room and running on the field all fresh.
Yeah, your hockey analogy falls apart so quickly there whenever you realize they're on the ice for such a short period of time and how they even quicken in extra time the times those guys are on the ice.
It's cold. It's cold though.
It's cold though. That's what we just need to make the grass colder. That's what needs to happen. So that's what it is. Let's get to Kevin Cabral now. The 21-year-old Frenchman who is at Valenciennes. I've been practicing. I don't know that's
very good.
That's actually how you say it, but it sounds good, so I'm gonna go with it. Valenciennes, the League 2 French side, that is way up there on the northern side of France, like almost in Brussels, in Belgium, in that area. So up there, we talked about Kevin Cabral. If you've been following along over the weekend, things had progressed. I was able to find a Galaxy source talking about how saying this was almost a done deal, and that continues. It seems like all the ducks are lined up in a row here, Kevin. L'Equipe is reporting out of France that the deal is done, that it is a 5-year contract, that the total amount is near 5 million euros, which would put it in the $5.9 million range. That's on the transfer fee side of things. We don't know. Tom Bogert from MLSsoccer.com put out that it is a little more than the 5 million that's been quoted. To me, a little more isn't $900,000 more and closer to $6 million. So we'll see where that number sort of finally lays out, but it's somewhere between that $5 million range and the $6 million range. Even if you just do standard. Siri was doing currency conversions for me today whenever I was looking it up and trying to figure out sort of where it is.
Well, there were some reports he's already here. Did you see him in the pool with all your other friends?
I did not see him in the pool. I would imagine that there was a report coming out of France that said that he was already on a plane towards I think they said Los Angeles or towards the United States would have been correct, because I think right now they'd have him land in Arizona to be part of the team there. And Arizona, we know, has a shorter quarantine time, even though, by the way, I will strongly argue the CDC and their international quarantine, whenever people are coming from international landing, is a much longer process, quote unquote, than some of these other things. But maybe it's, sports teams and the testing they do, maybe they're allowed a shorter interval. I'm not going to second guess it, but that's sort of what you're seeing. We don't know if it's really a 5-year deal, Kevin, or if it's like a 3-year deal. And it has 2 option years, right? We haven't sort of been keyed into that, although I imagine that we're probably going to learn that information here pretty shortly. So with Kevin Cabral, I was talking to somebody close to the organization who said that Kevin Cabral is young. 21 years old, which is important because we're going to talk about the U22 Initiative again. He's 21 years old. This person says that he has a lot of talent, but obviously is still a work in progress. He's 21. They still need to develop him, but is really excited about the talent that they think that they have with Kevin Cabral. Apparently, a bunch of people were interested in Kevin Cabral. So if that ends up being true and the LA Galaxy won out in that's an interesting thing. But the transfer fee, Kevin, anywhere between $5 and $6 million is not a small amount.
Well, he's 21. He started at 28 games this year, as we mentioned earlier. That's a lifetime high for him. He would have started 29. He would have started this weekend, but he was held out of the lineup at the last second.
That is correct.
And everyone is suggesting it's because the deal was done. He wasn't on a plane yet necessarily, but they're not going to sign the deal and then let him go play and get injured. He scored 7 goals this year, had 4 assists. Those are also both lifetime highs. The team is in the middle of the table in the second division, meaning they're not going to go down, but they're not going to go up.
Right.
He's a guy at 21. If the transfer fee is anywhere around $5 or $6 million, what I'm hearing is he's a guy who is a good talent, who is raw, who is developing, and a second division team, especially with the financial problems that they're having in French football, League One and League Two, with the broadcast rights and everything else with COVID, they're really, really facing a tough time there financially. That it made it much better deal for them to try to sell him, get the money while he was hot, and use it somewhere else. And people who are supporters of him in France are saying this guy deserves to be paid what a top flight striker, we're not talking about Premier League striker, but what a good striker, he should get paid that. He shouldn't be getting second division money. He should be getting top tier money, and he'll get that in MLS.
So the interesting part about this is certainly if you look in the past, if you said, oh, well, this guy's going to make between $5 and $6 million on a transfer fee, and let's say the deal is 3 years plus 2 options and a possibility of extending it to 5, you would say, well, this guy is a designated player, Kevin, because you would know that the amount of money plus a salary plus everything else would drive the LA Galaxy into basically making him a designated player. But
there's an option now.
Yeah, there is an option with that. And that's really why I think the LA Galaxy went out and got this player. And again, we're assuming that this is going to wrap up. I don't have anything that has told me it's done, but everything is pointing towards it's done, and we should be finding out here eventually in the next couple of days that it's been a done deal and that he's signed and that he's already here in the United States, however that ends up working. But what is now available to them is the U22 Initiative. And that U22 Initiative, we've talked about it before on the show, we've sort of broken it down, but basically it allows for an unlimited transfer fee or an unlimited acquisition fee that does not hit the salary cap in any way, is not restricted. So the LA Galaxy can pay $5 million, they can pay $6 million, Kevin, they could pay $20 million for him. It wouldn't matter, except that that's real money that they have to write a check for. It just wouldn't matter, the salary cap. The restrictions on that are that you have to be under 22, that you can't turn 22, I think, in the year that you are signed. So that's not a problem. With the 21-year-old, he will be 22. I'm trying to remember. I think he just turned July. Yeah. So,
yeah, I was going to say July.
Yeah, you can't turn 23. That's what it is. It's the 23 thing during that time. And that basically you can stay in that program until you're 25, and that you can't be paid more than the max budget number, which right now is $612,500. So his salary can't be more than $612,500. And then that salary only hits the cap at less than $200,000. So you can pay him $612,500, but you don't have to, you only take a cap hit of less than 200. And I think it depends on the age, whether or not it's 200 or 150, or as it cascades down and all that stuff. And then, like I said, I think you graduate the program at 25. So the LA Galaxy would be able to keep him in this U22 initiative until the year that he turns 25. So that's why seeing the contract years is really sort of the interesting part of that, Kevin, which is how does that fit in with him graduating, quote unquote, graduating or expiring from that system? That'll be something that we're watching. And then obviously we're watching a transfer fee, because this could be one of the larger transfer fees the LA Galaxy have sort of ever paid. And it's for a 21-year-old who's an up-and-comer, who's a winger. It does not mean that the LA Galaxy can't sign another DP either, Kevin. This keeps a designated player spot open. And I know there was some confusion with people saying, oh, well, if they keep the DP spot open, then they're going to be forced to keep the DP spot open with this signing, and that's not how it works. Now, if the Galaxy wanted to go out and sign 2 more U22 players, Kevin, then they would need to keep that designated player spot open, and I think they could use it on a young DP, but they couldn't necessarily use it on somebody who's like over 23, or there's a whole bunch of restrictions that start to go into that. With just signing one, with the U22 initiative, which is what we're assuming, with that one signing, the LA Galaxy are unrestricted, at least from the rules that we've seen so far, unrestricted on using that for any designated player they want. So let's say if miraculously all the court proceedings suddenly clear up and the LA Galaxy want to bring in Christian Pavone, and that happens, they can still bring in Christian Pavone, and they would still be able to keep Kevin Cabral in there as well. So a lot of interesting things that come because of this signing.
Now with Kevin Cabral, he was born in Paris, but his family is from Cape Verde. And his brother Remy is also a football player.
His twin brother, by the way, twin brother.
Right. Right now, he's wearing number 26. That's Efrain Alvarez's number, I believe. So maybe there's going to be a little arm wrestling, or maybe Efrain gets to keep it. The new guy has to go find another number. But he is a winger, but he can also play forward. He is a good finisher. I wonder if we talked about this earlier and you shot it down, but if there are Chicharito problems this year, I wonder if he's a guy that could go in there, either play as a tandem striker or whether he becomes the target striker for a while.
I mean, yes. I mean, I'm all for flexibility, and I think, if Chicharito, knock on wood, gets injured, then, you could see a whole bunch of different guys sort of play that position. There is flexibility, and I think Vanney and Dennis DeClosa have sort of been very focused on allowing for some of that flexibility, right? We know that, Grant Serra is going to come in and he can play on the right or he can play on the left wing, right? And I think the same is sort of with Kevin Cabral, who mostly plays on the left wing. So you're talking about a start that, in a perfect world, Kevin, the LA Galaxy probably would have signed Christian Pavone, and they would have gone out to get Kevin Cabral, and they would have been like, Cabral's going to come in the second half, and he's going to do a whole bunch of things, or he's going to spot start, he's going to split time with Grant Serra. There's flexibility in doing all this. I think because of the situation they're in right now, with not having a starting left winger, that he comes in and he's the starter at that position too. So, people are saying if you pay $6 million for a guy, then he better be starting. And I think the Galaxy understand this is a work in progress. It's a guy with a tremendous amount of talent. And I think they're sure of that. But the final product that he's going to be, Kevin, I think they're hoping that it's going to be very good, because they're going to probably look to get their money back at some point whenever they sell this guy to another league down the road, in 2, 3, 4 years. But at the same time, right now, they realize that they have some work to do with him to really turn him into what that, a really top flight sort of player he can be. So it's a development project as much as he will be a starter right off the bench, at least in my mind. I know people are disagreeing, saying he has to start if you're paying him that much money, and that's not. His salary is only going to be less than $612,500, and knowing that. That sort of puts it in a different realm for me. Yes, a lot of money on the bench, but the Galaxy are playing this, sort of in the long term. This is a long-term project more than a short term.
Well, and you're right on the long term, because look, the guy's 21. Let's say he's as good as people say he is. In 3, 4, 5 years, he's a guy, maybe less. He's a guy that needs to go to the Premier League or needs to go to a major league in Europe. So you sell him, you make a bunch of money. And then you've got Dunbar and some other players, young players. Efrain Alvarez will probably be gone by then, but some young players that might, at that point, Dunbar's only 18 now. In three years, he's 21. He's still a prospect too. Yep. He steps in there. One thing I find interesting is we have Grant Serra from Monaco. He's in France. We have now Kevin Cabral from France. From France. Uh-huh. We have Victor Vasquez. He's from Spain. He was actually playing in Belgium, but he's Spanish. We have Williams. He was Irish. A lot of players coming from Europe. This is not what we saw the last couple of years, where every player they signed was from Latin America, and many of them from Argentina. Right. And I asked Vanney about that as well. Is this a new philosophy? Are you purposely doing this? Is this where you're comfortable? Is this where you have the comfort zone? And he said, no. He gave the answer that you would expect. He said, no, we're just looking for players that fit our style. He said, I'll take them from wherever they come. Each player is the best player that we think fits into our system, the one that we can afford. But I do think there is a message there, though, that it's not just this straight drumbeat of the Latin American players that Guillermo and Dennis were so familiar with, that now there is a sort of a different style, a different approach, a different mentality, and different experience level of some of these guys coming in.
The interesting part about that as well is we go back, and the Galaxy have had some French player connections, right? You had I think
Alessandrini.
I think Ciani was part of that as well. Whenever you would go in and see some of these guys who have sort of come in and really been guys who they thought would make an impact, and then there's also the Jovan Kirovski connection, because L'Equipe was talking about Jovan Kirovski and how he fell in love with the player and sort of came over to France and sort of saw, and that Kirovski has been working with sort of this French talent agency that has had links to all of the guys who the Galaxy have signed. So it's not out of the realm in terms of, the Galaxy didn't go real far outside the box. They've been in this position sort of looking at France and looking at players who maybe are a little undervalued or guys who they want through this before. So it certainly seems that Jovan Kirovski has his fingerprints on this, that Dennis DeClosa certainly knows what's going on with this, and that Greg Vanney does as well. And somebody asked me the question, they're like, so is this a Jovan Kirovski signing then? And in the past, certainly with Guillermo Barros-Schelotto, we were very sort of segmented. Whenever Guillermo would sign somebody from Latin America, especially from Argentina or from, a neighboring country, in South America, we would sit there and go, oh, well, this is a GBS signing, the whole deal. And then whenever there would be a guy who got signed from somewhere else that had, Dennis DeClosa had a connection. If it was in Mexico, you're like, oh, well, that's a DTK signing, like all these different things. I get the feeling, and this is just my personal feeling, is that it seems there's more unity within the decisions that are being made right now. And I don't just say this is a Jovan Kirovski signing. I think Jovan was part of the process. I think Dennis was part of the process. I think Greg Vanney was part of the process. I think a veto from any one of them could have killed any potential deal, and that all of them needed to be on the same page in order to make these happen. The other takeaway perhaps we can get from this, Kevin, is that at between $5 and $6 million, it's a significant sum of money for AEG to lay down whenever you realize they're going to pay Chicharito another $6 to $7 million in salary this year as well. We were wondering about AEG's financial position through this pandemic and where they're at, and spending $5 to $6 million on a 21-year-old for a long-term project is not a small amount. And I think if people were a little nervous, perhaps backs up the fact that AEG still has money to be able to be, spending. That's at least what I look at from here.
Well, I do think they're in a bad financial situation. I mean, around the world, they run entertainment venues and they run concerts like Coachella and things like here that they haven't been able to do. What I do think that they're doing, though, is saying we're going to go spend, we're going to reach into our savings and go out and spend it. It's not like they're the books are balanced in any way at this point. I think it is I think you're right, though. I think the point you're trying to make is there's a commitment there, and they're gonna bite the bullet a little bit. I think everyone's looking ahead. You saw what Cincinnati did. Of course, they're moving into a new stadium, but everyone's looking ahead and saying we're kind of by the COVID thing now. Knock on wood, maybe we're through. No. Fans are coming back. We're going to get this great broadcast deal in a couple of years. The World Cup is coming. So it's a little, I think we all do it in our personal finances, right? A little bit, run up the credit cards and know that bonus is coming. I think that maybe the Galaxy is doing that. They know 3 or 4 years down the road, if they can make it there, they'll be okay.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, they have to be projecting into the future to say that. But at least with AEG isn't going to suddenly fold. They're not, They wouldn't be out there spending this type of money if they were going to. And they're one of the richest owners in, Phil Anschutz and AEG is one of the richest owners in football. We know that. We've seen that list many times, like in the 12th or the 8th or the 7th spot in all of world football. AEG has a considerable amount of money, and the LA Galaxy are sort of lucky in that sense that they have an owner with such financial resources that even a complete gut punch to their finances this season still allow them to be able to prospect for a 21-year-old in Kevin Cabral and those types of things. So the LA Galaxy have a game coming up on Wednesday, April 7th. That's against the Colorado Rapids. That's a 3 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. That game at lagalaxy.com. Head over to our Discord if you're outside of that area, and usually there's guys who can tell you what's going on in there. So if you want to go to the Discord, you can find that, and the links are usually in the show notes for these shows, so check that out. And then the other sort of thing that's happening this week that is at least of note or of interest is, one, the LA Galaxy will play on Saturday, April 10th to close out that Sun Cup in Tucson. But on Tuesday, so we're recording on Monday, so on Tuesday, April 6th, the LA Galaxy will hold some media availability, and it looks like Victor Vasquez is going to be there as well, and that'll be a little later in the afternoon than normally we have that. So think around 2 o'clock instead of around 12 noon, which is usually whenever it happens. So expect to see some quotes from there. Perhaps we'll get some confirmations of guys actually on the ground. We know Victor Vasquez is on the ground because, Kevin, he's actually going to be...
No, that's Pete Vagenas.
Pete Vagenas. Are you sure?
Look, come on.
I don't know. I see. This is the problem with showing you any type of video on a podcast that is predominantly audio. The LA Galaxy released a Victor Vasquez video, and we of course are using that with the caveat that it came from the LA Galaxy, and they put it out. Victor Vasquez was training. I don't know if he was training with people. He was just by himself in that one video. It was a little slow motion, little turn, and a little catch and shoot. That type of thing. So he was in that. So yeah, Victor Vasquez is there, and he's expected to have some media
that was
availability.
like the Zapruder film. There was like more questions than answers from that little snippet. Did he shoot the ball at the net? Was it a pass? Did he score? Was the pass completed? What happened?
All can be answered tomorrow, Kevin, whenever Victor Vasquez has his media availability. So I'm sure you'll use your one question that you get to ask him about that video.
And then I'm going to give you the rest of my time.
You're going to see. You've been watching way too much C-SPAN. Way too much C-SPAN on that. So anyway, hopefully we'll bring you coverage of that, of what Victor Vasquez has to say. Maybe some updates from Greg Vanney as well. So those are the things that are happening this week. LA Galaxy just have 2 more preseason games, then it's back to SoCal to get ready for the Miami game. So everything is rapidly closing up here, and that's good, because then there'll be games that actually count. And whenever games actually count, that's more fun for all of us, and we'll hopefully that means we'll actually see starting lineups as well.
Well, and games with fans too.
Games with fans at Dignity Health Sports Park. There are fans in Tucson watching the game. You could hear them, just a smattering. But I heard that the Saturday game, that last game, is the one that is expected to have the most Galaxy fans. So keep an eye out for that. If you're headed on over to Tucson, have fun, be safe, get out of that city as soon as you can.
Can we agree that as much as we want fans back, and as important as that, we do not want an Arlington, Texas situation yet, do we? That was disgusting.
I just keep complaining about the parking that eventually will come back. Whenever they're going to make me pay for parking or something like that, and 2, it'll be more difficult. I get there early enough and I leave. That's all a joke. Please come back. You will enjoy it in the stadium. They are keeping everybody separated socially, and the capacity at Dignity Health Sports Park is going to be held right around 25% until the CDC or the California Health Department, the California State or the county health departments shrinks that 6-foot protected zone. So Galaxy are in the 25% zone instead of the 33% zone.
And the same thing, the Dodgers can have close to 20,000. They're going to stay at 14 to 15 because of that.
They're boxed in. You can't go any. That rule is currently superseding all of the capacity rules. So if you had a giant place, you could have more people. But
it's such a great thing. I mean, they're erring on the side of caution. I'm sorry.
They're just following the rules. Stop giving people credit for it. There is a rule, and they're not allowed.
And they're be nice.
No, there is a rule, and they're not allowed to not listen to that rule. That is the only reason. If they could get more people in there, I guarantee you they would all have more people in there. Which is why they're hoping eventually that rule gets shrunk down. I know you were trying to be nice. It doesn't work. That's not on this time. They don't get any credit for just following. They're like, well, we can't get any closer than 6 feet, and if we do, then that would be a violation of it. They will get fined. So I'm just here so I don't get fined. That's what those teams are doing right now.
Wear a mask.
Well, absolutely. All right. Anything else that you want to talk about? Can we be done? We can be
sure. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, but we should probably stop.
Let's stop for sure. All right. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter, it's at KBaxter11, and please head on over to LATimes.com, where you can find all of Kevin's wonderful writing covering the LA Galaxy and all of the other teams around Southern California, the nation, all that stuff. LATimes.com. If you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at Guesman, JGUESMAN, and of course at Galaxy Podcast. CorneroftheGalaxy.com is where you can find all of our articles, videos, recaps, all that fun stuff is up there. CorneroftheGalaxy.com, including rumors. Make sure you check it out. All right, for Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening, you've been watching Corner of the Galaxy from the box on CorneroftheGalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.